Okay, in the next hour, let's talk about what's happening in Africa in terms of peace, conflict resolution, and everything else. We're joined by Dr. Edgar Githua. He is an international relations, peace and conflict researcher, security analyst. He's here with us. Good morning, Dr. Ari.
Thank you so much, Eric. Thank you, Ndu. Thank you for having me.
Good morning.
Morning.
Welcome to the hot seat of the Situation Room.
Oh yeah, this is really a hot seat.
Kabisa.
Yeah, kabisa.
Now we'll be talking about private military contractors in Africa and the effect of having such groupings in the continent. Let's first of all talk about moving money in the continent, legitimately, legally. EcoBank.
On a platform that works, EcoBank, with 35 markets across Africa, has over 14,000 employees. It's very interesting to hear about a single platform that delivers around the continent and making it possible for you to move money from one country to another, to be able to get things done in one country just as you would in another. So it's a better way to transact. It's a better way to bank. It's a better Africa with EcoBank.
Kabisa, Senor. Dr. CT is not here. He is a bit busy attending to very, very important matters. But he'll be back. But he left me with the day's proverb, and he told me when Dr. Githua comes, please give him the proverb. Tell him to give you an interpretation of that proverb. And the proverbs this week are from Angola. Today's proverb: you cannot do without water, even if it drowned your child.
It's a deep one. It's a very deep one. Yeah, I mean, water is life. That's what they say. Water is life. Without water, it forms the basic building block. I mean, a human body can survive even up to, let's say, 7 days without food. But you can't go indefinitely without water. So you need water for plants. You need water for life. Basically, water is everything. So, yeah, I can feel what the Angolans were thinking about.
What do you think the deeper meaning is?
Sometimes, even when you've gone through, I mean, you're okay, granted it's a very sad situation, your child drowns in this water. But it doesn't mean that you're ever going to keep on blaming those kind of situations and saying, because I had a bad experience with this, that I'm not going to ever rely on it ever again. So I'm just thinking, you'll never say you'll not go to the river to fetch water because that's where your child died. So sometimes you have to move past some particular trauma in life to be able to just get to the next level. Yeah. That's my interpretation of it. I'm just trying to...
As CT would tell you, you can never be wrong. It's your own interpretation.
I get you.
Yours is always right.
I hear you.
It's your perspective on how you view it, and that's an interesting one, the way you've put it.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, we've seen many conflicts on this continent of Africa. Many, even from where our proverbs are coming from, Angola. For many years, they were in conflict. Namibia, the neighbor, they were in conflict. Currently, West Africa, conflict. Central Africa, conflict. East Africa and the Horn of Africa, conflict. The North, we have seen conflicts. Basically, Africa, there keeps, we just keep hearing of conflict here and there, armed conflict. And in many of these cases, we usually hear of some external players either pulling the strings from afar or even having boots on the ground and actually manipulating the outcome of this conflict. In some cases, it's not even an armed conflict, but it's a political situation that's being managed by some foreign boots on the ground. There was a recent election in an African country where there was a whole allegation that a foreign country had some boots on the ground that were doing a lot of things and managing that election towards a desired outcome. Private military contractors.
Correct.
Otherwise known as?
PMCs.
Otherwise known as?
PMCs.
What are they?
Thanks for your question, Eric. Private military contractors are basically, their composition is of mercenaries, ex-military soldiers from various nationalities, but the business model around them is that these are hired guns, outsourced to just go and, some of them provide security and others to just commit other nefarious and illegal activities in other countries. And like you've rightly put it, some are used to subvert election outcomes. Some are used to entrench foreign interests in our in the mineral sector of Africa. So they are what you want them to be. They are your hired guns for whatever you want to be. But ideally, they package themselves as security consultants. Some of them, especially when you had the piracy issue at the Gulf of Aden for the longest time, some of them package themselves as the alternative that is going to help, safeguard those shipping lanes and to help avoid, beat up the piracy and try and reduce the piracy and all that. So to an extent, you'd look at it, the business model they come in or the psychology they bring in is that we are providing security, what governments cannot provide. We're willing to take risks that governments are not willing to expose their own militaries to. But like you said, now that is a very gray area that gets abused. And for the conflicts that you mentioned in Africa, we are increasingly seeing that the business model they're taking on in Africa is not just to provide security. They have a hidden agenda as well. Yeah.
For a very long time, the word that's been used here is mercenaries.
Yeah, that's correct.
And then mercenaries has been with a negative slant.
Yeah.
Private military contractor sounds, legitimate and legal and proper with the front office and the secretary and a boardroom. Are they legal?
Now, to the extent when they form and have offices and actually give you a contract and tell you on our roster we have legitimate soldiers who retired from the military and they are honorable, they sound like a legitimate outfit and they are legal. In fact, the creation of PMCs, they are legal outside there. It is what, either in their desperation to look for finances, it is what they end up now doing to sustain themselves, because not all, they can't get jobs all over the world. They can't, it's not something that you just wake up and outsource very quickly. It is these extra things that they are trying to do to remain relevant that are now creating a problem. When they now start offering their services to the highest bidder for all acts, nefarious acts, illegal activities, that is where now the illegality starts showing up.
Who's hiring these folks? Because obviously there's supply, there's demand. Right? Willing buyer, willing seller. They wouldn't exist if somebody or certain parties were not engaging them.
Exactly.
So who's engaging them?
Number one, big shipping companies, especially because of the situation of the piracy. For the longest time, it was actually at the height of piracy. So the owners of these big shipping lines decided, you know what, we need to safeguard our cargo. We need to just safeguard our ships as they go through the Gulf of Aden. So that is one person. Two, illegitimate governments all over the world, but now especially in Africa. People who've come to power through the back door and want to hold on and to cling on to power, and they feel their own militaries, their own police forces will not be able to assist them to do that. Dictators and strongmen who want to once again just hold on to power. Those are the people who are giving them this kind of jobs.
They want to hold on to power, but then if let's look at it from a nation state point of view. Somebody who wants to hold on to power, engaging a PMC.
Yes.
But they also have control of defense forces, they have control of army, they have control of military. So what would a PMC then invited into a conflict be able to achieve that defense forces or military or whomever else, security forces would not be able to achieve?
Let's take the Sahel region, which is a very good place to look at when you're answering that question. France, for the longest time in the Western African bloc of countries that it had control over, engineered it such that the militaries of those countries were not very well equipped or did not have the capacity to deal with certain problems, such that these countries would always need French forces, French boots on the ground to coexist with their militaries. So you find this engineered failure, and especially in the West African, the Sahel region, the West African, the French bloc. So those militaries were not able to deal with certain problems. So when insurgents started coming up, the collapse of Libya, the rise of the jihadist movements in the Sahel region overwhelmed those militaries of that region. So you find countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger are fighting jihadists. They have their own standing militaries, but they are not well equipped. They don't have the requisite training. The jihadists appear to be even more trained than them and better equipped. So what do these governments do? quickly look for someone to help them. But instead of looking towards ECOMOG or ECOWAS to assist, they decide, you know what, let's try and get these people who are going to, we're going to cut an underhand, under the table deal, getting the PMCs to help us. You know, it's easier to pay them, give them a gold mine or two, give them some resources or two. They'll take care of your security. So that is the model that's been working. So it is not that these African governments do not have their own militaries. They have their own militaries, but they do not have the capacity.
Who makes up these groups?
The PMCs? The PMCs are, number one, let's take the Wagner Group, for example. It is formed around 2014. Their objective is to help fight in the Crimea region, the Donbass region. And where do you get the people from? You recruit from ex-military soldiers, ideally Russian from the Balkan states, prisoners, we've been made to believe. And also, we also recruit from many other militaries. People like even Kenya, let me dare say, even Kenyan soldiers who've retired from the Kenyan military, some of them have ended up working for PMCs in Iraq at the height of when the US was in the Iraq. There were Kenyan soldiers working there as PMCs with the legit salaries and all that. But then what you do, some PMCs are legit in the sense that they do background checks on who they bring on board. These have to be honorably discharged soldiers who have retired from legitimate militaries. But then if you look at groups like the Wagner Group, I mean, if they can go there, recruit from prisons, that tells you already the caliber and the mindset of the kind of soldier they will have on the ground in whichever part they are in Africa.
I'm still stuck at they're hired by governments.
Yes.
And in some cases, private companies.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
When a government is recruiting an external force to come and offer some security service, what does it call it?
Thank you. They will say we are getting, and they will say we are getting trainers. All right? They will have to legitimize it. Because no government in the world wants to ultimately declare or admit that we are ceding our sovereignty. And remember, security and defense is a core function and a core output of sovereignty. No government outside there wants to say that we have been unable to take care of our own security situation. So they will say we are getting trainers from whichever part of the world to come and bolster our military, come and help increase our expertise, come and just train our soldiers and our battalion commanders on new tactics, or we're bringing them so they can help us understand this new equipment we've brought from this country. They're helping us to now learn how to utilize this equipment.
Okay.
So on that, guys, you'll hear first 100 trainers have come on ground, 200 come in, and before long, you know it, a whole contingent of 1,000 soldiers
are operating in the ground.
Operating in your soil.
Are they operating within the established legal framework of that country?
Yes.
Or are they given a free hand? Or does the government tell them, okay, you can go and clear that area of all those nonsensical nuisance of people?
Exactly. So,
and we shall assume that, they died by natural causes.
I like the way you've put it. Ideally, there is what is on paper. They've come in to train our soldiers and build capacity, teach us how to use weapons, teach us how to use this advanced equipment we've bought. But then when the jihadists attack or during an operation, they will be told, we are using these extra trainers. We use them to go and help fight the jihadists. And so the government sanitizes that by saying, we were fighting rebels.
Okay.
Yeah. So the PMCs were around and they helped us to fight the rebels. And that kind of sanitizes their image and what they're doing in the country. Now, the problem comes in their continued usage and how are you going to keep them there? How are you going to pay them? That's where now you start now. There are very gray areas about who is funding them. How are you going to fund them?
So, Dr. Githua, you see, it begins with the government designating one group of people as a proscribed group.
Yes.
You've called them jihadists, you've called them guerrillas, you've called them
rebels,
you've called them whatever. It's a government that basically says, you people in that corner, I'm going to call you rebels from this day on.
Correct.
And I need to deal with you militarily.
Yes.
And I need to use, when I'm saying militarily, that means I'm using not the conventional security, I'm going a notch higher.
Yes.
And I shall even bring in a group of people that will sort you out, protect these good citizens from you bad elements. Internationally, how is this recognized?
Now,
does the international law recognize the government's designation of a certain group of people as rebels, as whatever, as unwanted? And does the international law recognize the use of extra personnel who are not in the formal military structure to deal with an internal security problem?
Yeah, thanks. That's a very good question. Number one, all countries have their own sovereignty. So when they are dealing with an internal matter and they feel they are overwhelmed, so long as it is the legitimate government that asks for outside help, it is recognized under international law. What is going to happen now that you've come into the purview of international law, it will not be Kenya asking the PMC directly to come. It will be Kenya asking a particular country to come and aid us. Now, what that country sends to us, this is now the gray area now. What that other country sends to us do not have to be their defense forces to come and assist, because you're allowed under international law to seek for help from whoever you want to help, so long as you're a legitimate government. You've been unable to contain particular elements within your country.
Yeah.
Where the problem now occurs with some of these things is that in the regional security architecture of most countries, for example, let's take West Africa. Any security issue that a country in West Africa is unable to deal with, the people they should be looking forward to is one, the African Union, and two, ECOWAS. And ECOWAS has a military force called ECOMOG. ECOMOG can come in. So you would expect, if this deal is above board,
which is basically the member states of ECOWAS contributing
their
formal military troops into a team that goes there with a proper structure.
Okay. Just like Kenya sending soldiers to Somalia under the AMISOM.
Yes.
So we are helping Somalia deal with its problems, but we are already covered by the security architecture and international law.
Yeah. Which is supported by some resolution of the African Union.
Okay. So you find, the question and where we find all these issues coming up is, why aren't these West African states not asking ECOMOG to assist? It's because, number one, they know even their legitimacy in power is under question. Remember, some of these countries, the current leaders are in power because of coups. They have come in and overthrown legitimate democratic governments.
Okay.
Yeah. So now, that kind of ties their hands from going to ECOWAS to ask for help, because ECOWAS will first of all tell them, number one, we do not recognize you as the legitimate leadership of that country.
Yeah.
Return Bazoum to power, return all these other leaders you've overthrown into power, then we will sort out your security issues. They do not want to do that.
Okay.
These illegitimate leaders who are in power, no. We can only now turn to this black gray area, the PMCs, to come and take care of our security problems. So, and the PMCs know you're in a catch-22. You do not have the legitimacy to fall back on the African Union. You don't have the legitimacy to ask ECOWAS for help. So we are your only option. So when the PMCs come to negotiate with you, even the terms and conditions, even though we do not see the contracts and what they agree, that is why now they go into the mining sector, start picking up all these things. And those West African countries will do nothing but they will get the security they're looking for, quote unquote, but they'll be taken advantage of by these PMCs.
It appears to me that there's an issue of power.
Yes.
Those nations that have power will not use PMCs within their own soil.
There you go.
They will use PMCs externally.
Exactly.
America showed us a very good example of this.
Yeah.
In Iraq.
Exactly.
They had several PMCs.
Yeah.
One of them is Blackwater. And we know the scandal that came out of Blackwater and its operations in Iraq.
Yeah.
We have boots on the ground as America. Then we also have other boots on the ground who are helping our boots on the ground in doing some, small things like opening gates and shooting one or two people. That relationship between this country that has boots on the ground, whose taxpayer is financing the boots on the ground, and whose taxpayer is also financing this other private security contractor. What is that? That's I'm stuck on trying to understand this. Yeah. Because before we call them, mercenaries, and we assume, that company X wanted to go and acquire some mines, and so they just brought in some ragtag militia and used them. we have seen countries that are properly paying these people.
Yeah. I want you to think about it this way. Imagine you have a business, you have an enterprise, and your core business is to manufacture, or is whatever it is that you do. Let me take Standard Group decides, for example, our core business is news production, and that's our core business.
Yep.
Now, the cleaning services, if we hire our own cleaners, we're going to pay them insurance. Our overheads are going to be quite high. We'll pay them insurance, we'll pay them these benefits, pension and everything. Why don't we subcontract? Why don't we outsource our cleaning services? Then we outsource the guards who take care of the premises to be opening the doors and all that. So think about it in that model.
Business process outsourcing.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we are like, we want to just hire journalists and presenters and anchors to do what they do.
Yeah.
Because that's our core business. Yeah. The cleaning of the building, the security of the building, and these other small things, we will outsource that to extra people. That is now what the US does. So it wants, number one, when you subcontract, when you hire the PMC is involved in paying its own soldiers, their salaries, their pensions, their compensations if they get killed in the line of duty. Then the core American soldiers are going to be just left doing the core business, and then you minimize loss of lives of your own soldiers because you're going to get backlash from your citizens back at home. And even your taxpayers will not be complaining too much that why you're allowing our soldiers to die. But when you now subcontract the PMC, they take on those extra risks for you. That is when it is done legitimately. Yeah, that's when it's done legitimately.
That was going to be my question, because then obviously there's a caveat to that, and saying that when it is done legitimately, in what instances then is it not done legitimately?
What's not done legitimately is now what we are seeing the Wagner Group doing in the Sahel region, in, that area. I'll give you an example of Central African Republic. It is the government, the sitting president who was losing power, who invited them in to come and provide security, bolster his security, and quote unquote help him to hold on to power. And so from 2017, they've been in CAR mining gold. There's a big mine called Ndasima. It's a gold mine there. They've been really doing a lot of things. They've been accused of many atrocities around there. So you find, if you go to clips of the presidential election that was just done by the president, his bodyguards are PMCs. Not his own army, not his own soldiers. Showing you that he has now actually legitimately brought them on to, I don't know whether the word to use is to supplement his security or to intimidate his opponents, that now I have this extra muscle on my side. And they kind of, quote unquote, like Eric said at the beginning of the program, they kind of managed the election, helped to manage the election, and lo and behold, the guy is in power.
Has there been any issue raised at the African Union, at the UN level?
People have complained. Opposition leaders there have complained, but they've been clamped down on. This is now where you begin to see the connection between PMCs and the suppression of democracy, because now they're subverting the will of the people and being used to clamp down on any dissenting voices. But now you've rightly raised it. The African Union, things are raised. The African Union is slow. Why? It has a principle of non-interference in individual member states and their politics. So we kind of look like it kind of looks like the African Union shoots itself in the foot, because by this clause of non-interference, even when African democracy on the African continent is on a gradual decline, it doesn't speak up, it doesn't do anything about it, because it could pronounce itself. The African Union has a Peace and Security Committee. It could actually say, bring it and make it an agenda and say, why don't we raise a force to go and, instead of the Central African Republic relying on this PMCs, why don't we send a force there to just take care of the security situation? That is where we find ourselves.
Shortly, Dr. Edgar Githua is an international relations, peace and conflict researcher, and also a security analyst. He's our guest. We are talking about private military contractors, aka mercenaries, on our African continent, the danger this is posing to democracy. What's the genesis of all this, and where is it heading?
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.